D&D number 9, Circle of Life, in Jesus' name, chapter 25, May 22nd, Wednesday, later afternoon. Pine Forest, Georgia. Gabe was pretty quiet as they drove the few miles to Master Apple's martial arts studio on Main Street in the heart of Pine Forest. He watched his father as he drove. His father had 3 inches on him and about 30 pounds. He'd always looked the same to Gabe, big, strong, safe. Gabe figured to others he might look big, strong, and dangerous. He had olive-colored skin that tanned deeply, just like Gabe, but his father's eyes were dark, while Gabe had gotten his mother's blue eyes. His mother called his father ruggedly handsome. Gabe wasn't blind. He knew women found his father appealing. Some of Gabe's teachers over the years had said as much about his dad. At an open house once, he'd actually heard his science teacher say to his English teacher, "Now that is one amazingly sexy-looking man," before they realized that Gabe was standing right there. "Something on your mind, son?" Gabe shook his head. "No, sir, I'm just thinking about stuff." "What kind of stuff?" He shrugged. "Just life, I guess." Come to any conclusions?" "About what?" "About life. Are you okay?" "Yeah and no, I haven't come to any conclusions." "Well, I guess you know you can come to me about anything if you need to ask me anything." Gabe's brow furrowed. Yes, sir, I know." They arrived at the studio, grabbed their bags, and went inside. There were a few students standing around before class, including Lena and her brothers, Charlie and Matt. Gabe and his dad went to the dressing rooms and changed clothes and came out in their white uniforms with their black belts wrapped around their waists. They took a moment to bow to Master Apple, who was 7th Dan black belt in 3 different styles. Gabe and Keegan stood in the front row of the class. When the class lined up, Keegan was especially welcomed because he didn't get to class very often, though he did train at home almost every morning. To be an Ameritech agent, one had to be at least a 2nd-degree black belt in 2 styles, and Keegan had far surpassed that. Gabe decided that now that he had no more football or baseball practices or homework, maybe he could concentrate on moving up a belt. Once they went through the initial opening exercises and warm-ups, Master Apple explained that they were going to take advantage of having Keegan in class by working on how to defend against multiple attackers. Gabe couldn't believe his luck. His eyes narrowed, or was it? Pushing the suspicions aside, he watched and learned. Master Apple made Keegan the one being attacked and had himself and other black belts do the attacking. When Gabe was watching, he was blown away by what he saw his father do, how quickly he moved, how all his moves were practiced and came naturally. Of course, he knew that about his father, had seen him in action many times, but having been attacked himself now, it was a new perspective. When Gabe was one of the attackers, he came at his father with everything he had. When his father turned it around on him easily, he listened closely as Master Apple explained to the class what had actually taken place. He then had Gabe and his father move in slow motion so the rest of the class could grasp what was taking place. And by the end of class, Gabe felt much more comfortable about what he was about to face. Later, once class was dismissed, Gabe had to ask, "Master Apple, did you plan this class because of the video of me that's circling around?" John smiled at him. "I admit, it was the catalyst that gave me the idea to address this subject. Not that I think you don't know how to do this stuff. I know why you didn't fight. I approve your reasoning. I simply thought I should go over this stuff for the benefit of my students." Gabe nodded. "Well, it was a great class, and I learned a lot, so thank you, sir." "You're welcome. So just 2 more days of school, huh?" "Yes, sir. Well, 2 half-days, and Friday will only be for graduation practice because there's a bunch of kids who can't seem to get down walking in a straight line. Go figure." "Well, we all have our cross to bear," John answered. He turned to Keegan and offered his hand. "Thanks for your expertise, Keeg." "It was fun. Let's do it again sometime." In the car, Gabe watched his father again. It was like he was seeing him with new eyes. His father turned and smiled at him. "Are you okay?" "Yes, sir. Dad?" "Yeah?" Gabe closed his eyes and shook his head. "Nothing." "Are you sure?" "Yep. I wonder what's for dinner." Keegan sighed. "I think your mom said Daisy was cooking tonight." Gabe smiled. Oh, good, spaghetti. I could do some damage to some spaghetti. Keegan smiled. I know you can. New scene. It's May 24th, Friday evening, Stewart Ranch, Pine Forest, Georgia. Gabe, Lena, and Charlie were breathing hard. Jake was kicking their butts, literally. They were out in the back pasture, out of sight of searching eyes. They'd been at it for almost 2 hours, and Jake finally called it quits. For now, it is what it is, Gabe. I think you're going to do fine. They all sat in the grass and picked up their water bottles. Gabe had so much respect for Jake. He was not quite 4 years older than Gabe. Only 4 years. In 4 years, would Gabe be able to hold his own against a Marine? He wanted to do just that, and there was only 2 ways to do it: join the military or go Ameritech. So, Jake, how close is what we've been doing tonight to what you do in the Marines? The smile left Jake's face. Not very close. How is it different? He sighed. Well, as a Marine, if I was defending against multiple attackers, I'd be using all available weapons. Gotcha. So, let's pretend you don't have your rifle or your sidearm. Jake frowned. Then I'd use my knife and slit their... He stopped quickly and glanced briefly at Lena and her 14-year-old brother and shrugged. Sorry. Lena only looked down. I know what you were going to say, Charlie said. Yeah, well, just hope and pray you never have to do it. Gabe sighed. The world was full of horrible, ugly things. His own father had taken many lives by the method Jake had started to say. It was not cool. It was a horror of war. Sometimes in the fight against the darkness of the world, you had to do hard things. That's what Grandmaster Keno always says. Gabe wondered how his father handled the feelings that must accompany having to do something like that. He was so quiet, so calm. Even the other night when Gabe had smarted off to him, instead of flying up the steps and tearing into him, he merely told Gabe to rethink what he was doing. And now Gabe was going to do something without his father knowing, and he was pretty sure he wouldn't approve. There was no way Gabe could back out now, though. But he should at least have the courage to go to his father and tell him what he was going to do. That thought made him queasy. Did he have the courage? Gabe rose. I guess I'd better be going home. Big day tomorrow. Jake, thanks for taking time for me. Lena, Charlie, thank y'all too. No problem, Gabester, Jake said as he rose and shook his hand. I'll be there. Really? Sure. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. No confidence in me? I have every bit of confidence in you. I'm just backing you up. Well, thanks. Bye, Gabe. I'm going to try to be there too, Charlie said, if maybe Jake will let me come. We'll see, Jake said. Lena rose and kissed his cheek. And I'll be there too, sweetie. You kick some butt. I'm going to do just that. Gabe walked back to the small road that ran along the fence line and jumped in his truck and headed home. He pulled up to the place he usually parked behind the garage and just sat there in his truck. He was seriously thinking about telling his dad what he had planned. He could mess up everything. Isla would be left high and dry if his father forbid him. He may have to defy his father, but he still should have the courage to tell him. If he didn't, then trying to prove he wasn't a coward would seem ridiculous, wouldn't it? Taking a deep breath, he headed into the house. He'd left the house earlier, right after dinner, and while he was gone training with Jake, his grandparents on his father's side and his sister should have arrived from Tennessee. His mother's parents had passed away before he was born. He'd have to greet Heather and his grandparents first before he could speak with his father. Hey, honey, his mom said as he came in the kitchen door. He smiled and kissed her cheek. Hey, Mom, how are you feeling? Any better? I'm having a pretty good day. Hopefully it'll be the same for tomorrow. Yep. Is there, anything you need me to do? Hang up a sign or anything? He asked with a smile. She frowned. What makes you think that there's a sign that needs to be hung? Huh? You just get up to bed and get some rest. He laughed. I will. I just want to see Nani and Grandpa and Heather and talk to Dad a minute. Is he in his office? No, I think he's in the den with the girls, and you'll have to wait to see Nani and Grandpa because they were tired and have gone to bed. Oh, I'm sorry I missed them. Me too, but you can see them at breakfast. Where have you been? I had some stuff I needed to take care of. Lizzie nodded, trying not to pry. Gabe headed to the den. Hey, y'all, he said as he entered. Hey, Gabe, the girl sang sweetly. Where you been? Rose asked. I had some things to take care of. He nodded politely to the stranger in the room, who stood and offered his hand. Hello, Gabe. I am Nolan Sawyer. I've heard a lot about you. Gabe smiled and shook his hand. Nice to meet you. I've heard a little about you, but I've read a lot more. Gabe, Heather said with a smile. Stop. How did you hear about him? Rose asked. Gabe shrugged. I have my ways. He reached out to his eldest sister. So do I get a hug or something? She giggled and stood and hugged her little brother. Sorry, I'm a little tired. We just got in about an hour ago. The trip seemed to take forever, and I don't recommend driving through the ATL on a Friday afternoon at the beginning of summer break. Traffic was ridiculous. The Grands were so tired they ate and went straight to bed. So if the Grands are in the guest room, where is Nolan staying? Gabe, Heather admonished. What? I'm just wondering if I need to give up my room for the weekend. I got a room next door at the inn, Nolan said with a smile. Don't worry, your room and your sister are both safe. I swear, Gabe, you are so like Dad, it's eerie, Heather said. Is that a bad thing? Not at all. So, where have you been? Gabe sighed. I just had a few details to take care of. He looked at his father. Dad, do you have a few minutes to talk? Yes, he thought he heard one of his sisters whisper. Keegan smiled. Yep. How about in my office? Gabe nodded and led the way. He waited to sit until his father had gone behind the desk, and he sat down. It was too late now to back out, though that was exactly what he suddenly wanted to do. He glanced at his father, who sat quietly, leaning back in his chair, his brows raised, waiting. I need to tell you something. Keegan nodded but said nothing. I'm not quite sure how to say it. I said something I shouldn't have said. It was a challenge. I issued a challenge. It was a bad decision, I guess. When those guys beat me up on Tuesday, at the end, I challenged them to come back and fight me again, after graduation. He paused for his father's reaction, but there was none, so he went on. I told them that I would teach them a lesson. I told them I would take on all three of them, and they laughed at me and said they'd be there, and they were going to bring some friends for entertainment. He looked closely at his father, but Keegan seemed very calm, though that usually meant the opposite. Gabe swallowed. So, maybe I shouldn't have issued the challenge, but I'm not sure if I would take it back. Maybe that's pride talking, and if so, then I guess I'm sinning, but I simply don't feel I should take it back. Not that I could anyway. It's happening tomorrow at 2 p.m. behind the old elementary school on Main Street. They'll be there. I've been assured by some kids at school. I'll have some friends there, too, to back me up. Not that I want this to turn into a big brawl. When his father still didn't say anything, he went on. There's another thing, too. Somehow, Isla August found out about it, and she called me and said she wanted to help me, like save face or something. She wanted to come video the fight and then interview me so that I could state publicly why I didn't fight the first time. At first, I told her I didn't want this to be a big public event, mostly because fighting in public, and especially on public property, is illegal. But she said she could get approval from the mayor to sanction this fight as a martial arts demonstration. And so I told her that she could video. He paused and blew out a breath, but his dad still didn't speak, and that was worrisome. So this guy, his name is Will Cole. He spent some time in a correctional facility. I don't know what for, but some kids say it's for assault with a weapon. I don't know what kind of weapon. Isla thinks her presence will discourage anyone doing anything stupid, like pulling a gun or a knife. Anyway, Dad, I've been told that I should just walk away. And I know that's what I should do, but I just can't, Dad. I can't make myself do that. It's not in me. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I'm not really telling you all this to ask your permission or to even get your support, because no matter what you say, I am going to be there, and I am going to fight these dudes. The other day, when you didn't punish me for smarting off to Mom, you said it was because I'm becoming a man, and you can only advise me now. So I just want you to know that I cannot walk away from this. If it's just pride making me do this, I'm sorry. If it's shame from being labeled a coward, I'm sorry. I don't know why I feel so strongly about it, but I can't walk away. I have no idea how Isla is able to get the mayor to sanction this fight. And so if that isn't true, I could end up getting arrested. Even with that hanging over my head, I'm still going to do it, Dad. He sighed and shook his head. I don't even know why this whole stupid thing is so important to me. He stopped and looked at his father and shrugged. Okay, well, I guess I'm done. Keegan smiled. Well, you explained that very thoroughly. Who told you to walk away? Jake? Keegan nodded. And now, I have a confession of my own to make. Isla is not the one who got the mayor to sanction the fight. Gabe's brow wrinkled. Huh? John and I went together to speak to the mayor and got it done. Gabe shook his head. But how? Oh, Jake? Yes, and he's pretty torn up about it, so don't be angry with him. He loves you like a brother, and if you think your sibling is in danger, you do whatever you have to do to keep him safe, even if it means you break your sibling confidence. Gabe thought a minute. Okay, but Isla, I called her in. I knew she had the power to repair your online rep. I also used her to get the mayor to sanction the event. She'll give lots of credit to him and get lots of publicity for our little town, which will eventually cause much growth and provide more jobs and maybe even get more kids to stick around instead of hightailing it out of here the moment they graduate. While Gabe thought about that, his father went on. Now, let's talk about this need you have to fight these guys. This need to complete what you started by issuing the challenge. Yeah, I know it seems prideful. Well, I'm not a doctor of psychology, but I do have a degree in psychology, and I have spoken with Grandmaster Kino. And it's not about pride, Gabe. It's not about you being labeled a coward. It's about healing. Healing? Yes, son, give yourself a break. You need to heal not just physically, but emotionally. You've been struggling with this. All the things that you faced when you were abducted, and then 3 guys beat you down. It's much more than pride. When these things were happening to you, you were experiencing certain emotions and certain feelings. You have to replace these feelings and emotions with different ones by having new experiences. I don't think I understand. Okay, let me use something completely unrelated and removed from you as an example. Let's say a woman is sexually assaulted. After a rape, many women don't want to be intimate with their husbands for a long time, and those women take a much longer time to heal. And then there are some women who want to be intimate with their husbands quickly. They say they want to replace the bad memory with a good memory. It helps them to erase the assault. These women heal more quickly. It's called replacement therapy, and you need to replace your feelings of weakness and of vulnerability with victory and strength. You feel so strongly about this fight because you need to feel powerful again. You need to regain your confidence. It will go a long way to your healing, and therefore, I'm all in. I'm behind you 100%. Gabe couldn't keep his eyes from tearing up. So, Keegan continued, tomorrow, you will wake up, go to your graduation ceremony, go kick some butt, do an interview, and come home to the giant surprise graduation party that I know you know your mom is planning. Gabe smiled. Yes, I know. After your abduction, you went back into the dugout, and that was helpful. Then you went to baseball practice, and that was helpful. And then you got to play and did well, and that was extremely helpful. And now, this martial arts demo will top things off. Do you feel confident? Yes, sir, I do. Thanks to Master Apple's class Wednesday night and Jake tonight. I'm feeling pretty good. Good. And by the way, Will Cole did indeed serve time for assault with a weapon. But that weapon was a broken bottle. It was kid stuff. He got in a fight with an older kid. He thought his life was in danger. He grabbed an empty beer bottle that was lying in the alley and used it to fight the guy off. He cracked the guy's head. The parents pressed charges. Oh, well, that kind of makes me feel sorry for him, Gabe said. But maybe he's not so innocent because since he sucker punched me full force and I didn't do anything to him. Well, maybe not. You just win this battle and we'll work on sorting out Will's life for him afterwards. But, Dad, how can the mayor sanction this fight without Will's parents signing like a permission slip or something? Well, Will is 18. He just turned 18 a few weeks ago. The two guys who help don't go to your school. They are 18 and 19, and they also spent time in the same correctional center as Will. You know their names? Sean McMahon and Zane Thomas. Gabe smiled. Dad, you are amazing. Well, that was not a difficult thing to find out when you have the resources I have. Gabe thought a minute, going over everything he just found out. So, you found all this out and took care of all this stuff in just a few days, because Jake didn't know until Wednesday morning. Right. And you arranged Master Apple's class? He arranged that. Jake told him first, then John told me. Right, Gabe said, nodding his head. And you've been watching me and waiting for me to come clean. Yes, and you didn't disappoint me. I'm proud of you. Gabe blew out a breath. Well, don't be, 'cause I almost didn't tell you. Almost doesn't count. You did tell me. You passed the test. Gabe looked up quickly. My sisters know? Yes. That's why I heard one of them say yes when I asked to speak with you. They were relieved that I decided to speak with you. Yes, it was Rose. She had a bet on you and won. Who bet against me? None of your business. Gabe chuckled. Does Mom know? Yes, she and I always communicate about everything having to do with you kids. So that's enough questions for now. It's getting late and you need to get some sleep. Well, I'm going to grab a snack and I'll go straight to bed. Keegan nodded. Don't touch that cake in there or your mom will beat us both. I love you, son. As I've said before, you can always come to me, no matter what. Gabe nodded. I guess you just proved that to me. Thanks, Dad. Good night. New scene. It is May 25th, Saturday morning. Pine Forest High School, Pine Forest, Georgia. Jake held Lena's hand as they stood on the upper level of the stands at the 50-yard line, gazing out over the football field at Pine Forest High School. They, too, had graduated from the school. Currently, their hearts were full of sweet memories of their teen years. Even back then, they'd been attracted to each other, but they hadn't acted on it. They'd had other boyfriends and girlfriends, all the while pushing down the feelings they had for one another. Jake smiled down at beautiful Lena. She was tall for a girl, 5'7", but he still had 7 inches on her. Her beautiful red hair was down with only the sides pulled away from her face. She wore all white in deference to the coming hot day. Her flowy white skirt blew in the soft breeze. She wore a delicate white short-sleeved blouse and white sandals. And though the sky was bright blue and completely clear and a cool morning breeze was blowing, it would be up into the 90s by noon. They were about to be baked in the sun. They had arrived early to get and save seats for the family. I guess we better claim our seats, Lena said. They started to turn and head up when they heard a voice call. Jake! Jake, is that you? There was a feminine squeal. It is you! Oh, my goodness! Jake's former girlfriend from his senior year came running toward him. She jumped into his arms, almost bowling him over. As quickly as he could, he set her away from him. Hi, Becky. It's nice to see you. Oh, it's more than nice. Oh, my goodness, I can't believe it's you. You look amazing. You're so big and strong. She ran her hands over his shoulders and down to grip his biceps. Well, now, being in the military hasn't done you a bit of harm. Becky, you remember Lena Stewart? Lena smiled at the pretty girl. Hello. Oh, hi. I think I do. You were a junior when we graduated, right? Lena nodded. Right. Becky immediately turned back to Jake. So what are you doing here? His brow wrinkled. You know my family lives here in Pine Forest. I mean here at the graduation. Oh, Gabe Tanner's graduating. Our families are very close. Oh, yeah, that's right. And you live right next door to Jake, too, Becky said, nodding at Lena. That's right, I do, Lena said, smiling at Jake, actually enjoying how uncomfortable he was acting. Becky grabbed Jake's arm. Oh, my, it's so good to see you, Jake. You'll have to excuse us, Lana, but I just have to catch up with my old boyfriend. Lana's eyebrows rose, and she giggled. Jake gave her a stern look, then turned back to Becky. So, Becky, I'm guessing you haven't heard that Lana and we're engaged. Becky's mouth formed a perfect O. Engaged? Yes. You mean to be married? Yes. Smiling, Lana lifted her hand to show the ring, and Becky took her hand and examined the ring. Well, now, isn't that pretty? Becky said insincerely. It's so tiny and sweet. When I get married, my ring is going to be at least a full 2 carats, but I guess everybody has different tastes. Or priorities, Lana added pointedly. Jake pressed his lips together to keep from laughing. It was nice seeing you, Becky, Jake started, but we have to go save seats for the family. Becky nodded politely. Oh, of course. Y'all have a good day. It was nice to see you. She gave a salute. Carry on, soldier. Lana couldn't stop herself. He's not a soldier. Oh, did you drop out of the military? No, he didn't, but he's not a soldier. He's a Marine. Huge difference. Jake tugged on her hand, and he and Lana headed up into the stands and started laying all kinds of things in the seats. Hats, purses, programs, umbrellas, hand fans, sunglasses, car keys, and water bottles. Then they took their own seats. Lana giggled, rubbing her hand up and down Jake's arm. Oh, my, she is right. You are so big and strong. Jake laughed. And you are so bad. I know, right? Bless her heart. Jake chuckled and tilted her chin up and gave her a quick kiss. I am so in love with you, Bugs. She grinned. Back at you. About 15 minutes later, the Tanners arrived, and 11 of the saved seats disappeared. Next, Jody and John arrived, and Maddie wanted to come, but they all decided that the heat index would be too much for her, so she would join the family at the Tanners later. Only 15 minutes before the ceremony was to begin did Chaz and Lisa and Charlie, Matt, and Erilyn Stewart arrive and take their seats. What took y'all so long? Lana asked. We couldn't find a parking space. This place is packed, Lisa answered. Oh, you think that's Gabe's doing again? Lana asked. Probably, Rose answered. She held up her phone. Teen Spotter is streaming live, and she paused, pointed toward the steps, and here she comes. They all looked up as Isla August came toward them, her new cameraman zeroed in on their family. And here we are, Isla said brightly. Hello, Tanner family. Okay, people, you're in for a treat. I posted their picture when I did my last interview with Gabe, but today, here they are, live and in person, the entire Tanner family. The camera panned, and the Tanners all smiled. Little Iris waved, becoming a pro as she smiled at the camera. Keegan nodded at Isla, but was busy speaking to one of the senior agents on security duty. And while Isla conducted a brief interview with the family, Keegan stood and walked away to take care of business. Peering over the railing at the field, he could see 12 agents from where he stood. Others were manning the entrances to the field and the stadium. Today, because of the heat, they wore white polo shirts with their usual black pants. On the sleeve and chest was a black embroidered AMT, an abbreviation of Ameritech. They wore their regulation belt holsters, sidearms, extra mags, taser, cuffs, knife, and baton. They wore earbuds in their ears and were always in constant communication. The graduation ceremony would be held facing the home side of the stadium, and the visitors' stands were off limits, so that made it easier. The graduating class was just under 300, which was a relatively small class. Some larger high schools in Georgia would be graduating closer to 800. Is there a problem? John asked as he joined Keegan at the railing. A small one. One of the agents got sick suddenly. I've had an agent escort him to an urgent care facility. It's probably the heat getting to him, but just want to be sure. I have 2 more agents on the way. John nodded. Well, I'm sure I don't have to tell you that Jake and I can be of service if you need us. No, you don't have to tell me. You would be the first person I'd call on. Thanks, John. The music began. The always recognizable pomp and circumstance sounded over the loudspeaker. Keegan and John went to take their seats, and Iris was clapping her hands as Lizzie was using the red, white, and blue folded hand fan they'd passed out, along with the programs, to help keep a breeze on her and Iris's already sweaty faces. In keeping with the school colors, the boys wore blue cap and gowns. The girls wore white cap and gowns, and the valedictorian and the salutatorian wore red. Though Gabe's last name would normally require him to enter near the end of the processional, because he was summa cum laude and had the fourth highest GPA, he was fourth in line. His family cheered and waved, and he turned and smiled at them. Lena let go one of her ear-splitting whistles, and everyone laughed. Keegan took Lizzie's hand, and they smiled at their son. He wore a gold stole, 2 gold cords, and a green cord for community service. It wasn't the awards he achieved that made them proud, though. It was how hard he always worked to be the best he could be, not for himself and not for awards, but to be in service to God. Gabe was a blessing. Keegan glanced down at Lizzie, and she was sweating. "Honey, drink some water," he said kindly, opening her water bottle for her. She nodded and sipped. "How are you feeling?" "To be honest, not great, but I'll make it. Check on your parents, though." She grunted as Iris kicked her leg, and Keegan rose and picked up the baby. "Daisy, take Iris for a bit, please." He handed her off, then leaned down to speak with his father. "You guys doing okay, Dad? It's pretty hot." "We're fine, son. We have our water and our fans. We can make it." "If you start feeling lightheaded or dizzy, you tell me immediately," Keegan ordered. "It will be no trouble to get you back to the house and let you cool off and rest." "Nonsense," his father said. Keegan looked back up, and Iris was reaching for Heather, who gathered her baby sister in her arms and then fanned her. The toddler laid her head against her sister's chest and closed her eyes. Keegan sat back down as the salutatorian began to speak. The rest of the ceremony went off without a hitch. The valedictory speech was humorous and well done. The principal kept his remarks to a minimum. That was also well done because the heat was becoming a problem, and because Keegan wasn't real happy with the man since his meeting with Gabe. Keegan glanced back up to see a sleeping Iris now being held by Heather's new boyfriend. Points for him. Heather stopped fanning Iris for a second and kissed Nolan's cheek and then continued fanning. Keegan wondered just how long they'd been together. In deference to the sleeping child on his shoulder, everyone but Nolan watched and cheered as the students' names were called and they went forward to receive their diplomas. Mortarboards were thrown and retrieved. Hugs abounded. The kids marched out, and the stands emptied quickly. Outside the stadium, families gathered for pics with their graduate. Many families would be going out to eat to celebrate. Their family would head home for a giant party and celebration, but they had a little stop to make first. Gabe was hugged and photographed and was being videoed, and then Keegan told him to eat his energy bar and hydrate. He had work to do. He glanced at his watch. It was already 1. Time to head to Main Street. New scene. Still May 25th. It's Saturday afternoon. Old Pine Forest Elementary School, Main Street, Pine Forest, Georgia. There were only a few cars in front of the school because Gabe's friends and family had been told to park along Main Street and walk so that the amount of vehicles didn't scare off Will and his buddies. Gabe pulled his truck into a parking place. Peyton and Liam were with him. Elias pulled up beside him with Luke, Carlos, and Dion with them. They climbed out of their vehicles and headed to the back of the school. Isla August and her camera guy and a few others were already there recording as the boys walked up. Only a few minutes later, Will, Sean, Zane, and several other guys Gabe didn't recognize came around the back of the building. Gabe's eyes met Will's. There was so much anger in Will's eyes, and Gabe wondered what he'd ever done to the guy to produce such animosity. Gabe was the one with the right to be angry. He was the one who was attacked out of the blue by a bunch of guys he didn't even know, and as far as Gabe knew, Will didn't even get suspended from school, though Gabe had to fight just to get to walk at his graduation. It didn't make sense. As soon as Will saw Isla and the camera, he stopped. "What's all this?" They're going to video the fight," Gabe answered. "Oh, no, I didn't sign up for this." You videoed when you guys jumped me, didn't you?" "Yeah," Will smiled, "and it's given me hours of entertainment watching it over and over." "Well, good. So you shouldn't mind if I get video this time. Unless, of course, you're scared I'm going to kick your butt." "I'm not scared of you, Tanner. After your last performance, no one is scared of you. By the way, how's the eye?" Gabe allowed a short laugh. "As I'm sure you can see, it's still healing. Thanks for asking. And having people scared of me is not my goal." Exposing you to the world of justice is my goal. You know you blindsided me. You even know I wouldn't fight back. You even knew I wouldn't fight back. What makes you think that? Because if you thought for one moment that I would fight back, you would have been too scared to jump me. I already said I'm not scared of you. Prove it. I'm giving you this opportunity to prove it. I told you. I'll take all three of you on and still kick your butts. And the camera being here shouldn't make any difference at all unless you think you can't win. Or maybe it's something else. What do you mean? Maybe you don't like the camera being here because you intended to cheat. How could I cheat? Well, let's start with the knife you have strapped to your leg. Will looked down and back up, then bent down and removed the knife and handed it to a friend. So, does that mean you've decided to fight after all? Gabe asked. The two guys who had helped beat him up Tuesday stepped up. Let's do this, one of them said. Gabe held up a finger. One moment. There's going to be one rule. No weapons. Whatever, Will muttered. Check 'em, Gabe said, and motioned to what looked like a couple of classmates dressed in jeans and a T-shirt. Only Gabe knew that they were Ameritech agents. Pompous ass, Will muttered. You call me an ass, I call it smart, Gabe responded, as the agents removed two more knives and a set of plastic brass knuckles. When he saw what they removed, he realized either these guys were real criminals and thought nothing of using those kinds of things, or they truly wanted to hurt him. And since he didn't even know them, he wondered what the deal was. Did Mia Casellas hire somebody to hurt him for revenge? She didn't get out on bail, but she could work from inside, he guessed. Or were these guys just simply thugs looking for trouble? He sighed as the two agents moved away and told everyone else to back up so the fighters had room. Gabe had no weapons on him, but he didn't need any. He was completely capable of hurting these guys, and he suddenly realized that he didn't want to do it. But he would if he had to. He was conflicted. Not a good way to begin a fight. Grandmaster Keno had taught him that. With everyone backed up and several agents and Jake stationed at points around the large circle, Gabe stood there thinking. Are we going to do this or not? Will said, calling Gabe a few profane names. Gabe looked up. He knew the camera guy was zeroing in on his face, but he wasn't really bothered by that. I've had a change of heart, Gabe said. Little boy going to chicken out? Gabe glanced at the one who spoke. It was either Sean or Zane. Gabe didn't know who was who. No, I'm just giving you guys an out. You see, I intend to mess you guys up. In other words, you could get hurt. And I'm giving you an opportunity to walk away. Go ahead. Just walk away and we'll call this thing over. It won't be because you're afraid. It'll be because you're smart. Walk away. Because if you don't, you will get hurt. We'll take our chances. Gabe sighed and shrugged and nodded. He suddenly looked up at the camera and smiled. Well, welcome to our little martial arts self-defense demonstration. Today, I'm going to demonstrate how to handle multiple attackers. The three advanced toward Gabe, and he focused on Will because he knew he'd strike first. Gabe moved backward a few steps to get in rhythm with him. One guy circled behind Gabe. Will moved in fast and swung hard at Gabe's face. Gabe merely bent his head down to dodge the punch, grabbed Will's fist, turned his body, and smashed his elbow into Will's nose, while at the same time he kicked out to his back, knocking the one coming in from the rear to the ground. Will yelled and fell limply to the ground. Gabe had thrown one elbow, and one of the three was down and wasn't getting up. Blood poured from his nose. Gabe danced around, moving quickly so that the two left wouldn't be able to coordinate their attack, and the one he'd kicked came from his left, trying to throw some kind of karate kick. Gabe merely kicked his knee at just the right moment, hyperextending the joint. The guy fell on the ground, grabbing his leg in pain. Gabe then kicked him in the face just to be sure he didn't want to get back up. He turned quickly toward the other guy, who'd stopped in his tracks. He seemed unsure of what to do, and then the guy nodded at one of his friends standing behind Gabe. Gabe was aware of the interaction and was ready for a surprise rear strike from behind. Gabe then nodded at the guy in front of him. Bring it, or walk away. The guy ran at him, grabbed Gabe's shirt in both fists, and pushed him backward toward the crowd as if he were pushing a football blocking sled. Jake moved with blinding speed toward the guy at the front of the crowd, who'd just drawn a small pocket knife. He grabbed the guy by the wrist, almost breaking his hand. Not on my watch, bud. Drop it or you won't have the use of your hand for a while. The boy cried out in pain and the knife fell to the ground. Gabe had enough. He moved into the one who'd pushed him, grabbing the back of his neck and bringing his face down and slamming his knee up into his nose. He kneed his face once, twice he fell. Gabe stood over him, considered kicking him, but drew a breath and let the anger subside and walked away. The crowd was cheering. His friends were jumping up and down, patting him on the back, rubbing his head. Gabe allowed a smile and accepted their congratulations. He made his way to Jake and shook his head. Man, you saved me. I guess he would have stabbed me. Jake nodded. When the dude nodded at his friend, it caught my attention. I watched the guy pull the knife out. He put his arm around Gabe's shoulder. Still, you were thinking too much about the guy coming from behind and shouldn't have let that dude close enough to grab your shirt. Gabe nodded. Got it. Jake nodded at the Pine Forest police officers who were cuffing the guy, and now, since he was stupid enough to try to knife someone in public, he gets to visit a lovely Pine Forest facility. Gabe only shook his head. Lena ran up and kissed him on the cheek. That's from Taylor. She watched? Yeah, a bunch of people saw it. I mean, a whole bunch of people. Not just like the millions of Teen Spotter people. I live streamed, and so did Liam. Peyton and Elias came running and picked Gabe up into the air, and Keegan and John watched from afar. Jake slowly walked back to them. Keegan shook his hand. Thanks, Jake. That was a close one. Copy that, sir. Just doing my job, he said with a grin. As the crowd thinned and Ameritech agents and police officers ushered everyone out, Gabe gave his interview to Isla. Wow, Gabriel Tanner, that was one amazing display. You never disappoint. Even your little speech beforehand was perfect. That was some pretty tough talk, and you delivered. Gabe tried hard not to roll his eyes. I just realized that those guys were not trained at all, and I could really hurt them. I didn't want to, well, not too much anyway, so I gave them an opportunity to walk away. Well, you may not have wanted to hurt them, but apparently one of them really wanted to hurt you. I mean, that one guy had a knife. Gabe nodded. Apparently. Though I'm not sure why. I mean, I don't even know these guys. Not sure what their problem is with me. And who was your friend who took the knife away? That's Jake Apple. He's like a brother to me, and he's a Marine. Not much gets past him. Now, Gabe, would you mind telling us why you didn't fight back when they jumped you the first time? Because I think we can all see today that you certainly could have fought. It was for my mom, Gabe began. He told the whole story and put in his 2 cents worth about the no-tolerance rules, about how they sound like they're a good thing but instead are really harmful. Well, isn't it wonderful that Mayor Andrew Bradbury gave permission for this little march demo right here in the lovely town of Pine Forest, Isla continued. She turned and pointed her microphone toward the man on the other side of Gabe. Mayor Bradbury, some people are probably wondering why you would allow this public demonstration. Well, first, as you can see, we had it well under control. We had men from our city police department stationed throughout the crowd keeping order. And I allowed it because I think it was a shame that this excellent young man, born and raised in our town, had to take the beat down that he took. I wanted to show that we will not accept that kind of violence, and I want to encourage all of our young people to learn how to defend themselves. It's a worthwhile pursuit. Thank you, Mayor. I agree with you 100%. It's not often that a politician is willing to come out and take a stand, and I know that Gabe here is grateful for you having his back. Isla turned back to Gabe. Tell us, Gabe, where did you learn martial arts? Master Apple, who, by the way, is a co-owner of the Pine Forest Country Inn and 3 more country inns in small town Georgia, has a string of martial arts studios in Georgia, and he and his partner, Brian Cantrell, run Apple Martial Arts. Master Apple's flagship studio is right here in Pine Forest. What style does he teach? I mean, is it karate? Master Apple teaches Zendo-Ryu. Well, I actually know what that is, but for our audience, can you tell us what that means? It means the whole school of thought. It's a mixture of every style of martial arts brought together to use the best style for your current situation. Amazing. Did Master Apple come up with this on his own? No, he's a student of Grandmaster Kino from Kino Martial Arts. And so is Brian, and so am I, and Grandmaster Kino is the founder and teacher of Zendo-Ryu. Of course, Grandmaster Kino, that's how we all first came to know you, Gabe, at the mini-mart the Kinos put on a few months ago. Gabe nodded. Keegan, John, Chaz, Charlie, Jake, Lena, and Gabe's older sister stood by waiting for the interview to finish. Gabe was doing a good job drumming up business for the country inns and for Apple Martial Arts, but it was unbearably hot and all of them were sweating profusely. Peyton and a few more of Gabe's friends milled around talking about how quick Gabe moved and how strong he was and how proud they were of him. They were waiting also because they'd been invited to the party. And when Isla finally finished, she hugged Gabe, thanked him profusely. She shook the mayor's hand, thanked him too, and made her way toward her car with her cameraman. And Gabe watched her go and felt a wave of compassion, and he ran after her. Isla, he called. She turned, a smile on her face, and moved back toward him while the camera guy was loading their equipment into the van. I just wanted to say thanks for all you've done for me. You're a good lady. It's my pleasure for sure, Gabriel Tanner. He grinned. Why do you always call me by both names? She laughed. It's just fun to say. Gabriel Tanner. Has a good feel to it. He chuckled. Anyway, if you'd like, my mom is having a surprise graduation party for me, and you are invited to come. A surprise? It doesn't sound like a surprise. Well, yeah, but she knows that I know. I'm not dumb. No, you're certainly not that. So you'll come? Yes, I just have to go back to the motel and take care of some business first. So how is it traveling around without your brother? Well, he's relieved to go do other things, and my new camera guy, well, he's pretty nice. Gabe smiled. Is he single? Why, yes, he is, she said with a smile. Well, he's invited too, Gabe said. See you later. New scene. The Tanner home was large, 3 stories if you count the basement, 7 bedrooms, 7 baths, built for what they knew would be a large family. Keegan, with the knowledge and help of Chaz and his father Charles and John, had built it with their own hands. The large backyard was great for a pickup game of football or baseball, and just outside the back den, through 2 sets of French doors, was a deck and patio and pool, and that seemed to be where the main party had moved after they'd chowed down. The elder folk, Maddie Lewis, Charles and Patricia Stewart, and Keegan's parents, Deb and Roger Tanner, relaxed in the cool air in the front living room where a giant sign read, Congratulations, Graduate, with his name at the bottom and jersey numbers in the corners and glitter and confetti glued to it and a tiny handprint that Gabe guessed was Iris's. Gabe came in to greet the grandparents and see if they needed anything. He ended up serving them some of the giant cake and some sweet tea and shook the men's hands and kissed the ladies' cheeks and went back to the main party. Keegan and John carried a giant gift-wrap box about the size of a washing machine and set it down next to Gabe out by the pool. I thought we weren't going to open gifts while everyone's here, Gabe said. Well, this one is an exception. It's from the guys at Ameritech, and they insisted you open it at the party. What is it? Gabe asked. I don't know. Open it and find out. Gabe opened the gift, and everyone's eyes lit up. All right, Peyton exclaimed. Wow, Rose said. I get this one. She reached into the box and grabbed up a Nerf N-Strike Elite Disruptor. Keegan peered into the box. It was full of guns. Nerf guns. N-Strike Elite Rhino Fire Blasters, Fortnite ARL Elite Dart Blasters, Zombie Strike Flip Fury Blasters, N-Strike Elite Retaliators, and even several Elite 2.0 Compander RD6s. There were hundreds, maybe thousands of foam bullets and darts, and Keegan grinned. Let's do this. Oh my goodness, an epic battle. Please, you have to allow me to get this on video, Isla exclaimed. Gabe looked at his dad. They both smiled at each other and then at Isla and gave her a nod of approval. And while everyone divided up into teams and chose their weapons and ran off to make battle plans, Isla had AJ, her new camera guy, go get his equipment and then gathered a few forces of her own so that she could get phone video from different perspectives and different teams to edit together later. New scene. The firefight was coming to an end. There were only a few left standing. Gabe motioned at Peyton, the only one left alive on his 7-man team, which had included all his teammates from school. He pointed down the back hallway from where he currently hid behind the sofa in the den. They needed to make their way down that hallway and out the game room door to the backyard. It was their only chance. Lena and Rose, who no one wanted on their team and were scooped up by the older men, turned the corner of the stairway and jumped out firing. Gabe and Peyton easily evaded them and made it to the office and burst out the back doors, where they were immediately mowed down by Keegan, John, and Jake. Gabe and Peyton fell onto their backs, breathing hard. Keegan, John, and Jake stood victoriously over them, nodded at each other. "Hoorah," John said. Keegan and Jake echoed it. "I think I saw this guy move," Jake said, aiming his gun at Gabe. "No prisoners," Keegan barked. "Get 'em." The three Marines opened fire once again on Peyton and Gabe as they raised their arms to cover their faces. All the others standing around and sitting by the pool cheered and laughed. It had been a great and long battle. Some thought for sure that the young, spry kids would win, but the other team was led by two Special Forces veterans, and there was just no beating them. Lena and Rose stood over the fallen soldiers and smiled. "Looks like we were on the best team." "I wouldn't gloat if I were you," Gabe warned. "I'm not scared of you," Rose said. Gabe stood. "Another guy said that to me today and didn't fare so well." He nodded at Peyton. "You get Lena. I'll get Rose." The girls shrieked. The boys grabbed them and lifted them, walked to the pool and tossed them in. Jake nodded at Keegan and John. "I got this." Within a few seconds, both Gabe and Peyton were also thrown into the pool. Isla was in heaven. Her mind was going crazy on how to edit together the epic battle, the horrific final massacre, and the delightful act of revenge twice over. New scene. It's May 27th, early Monday morning, Atlanta Hartsfield Airport. They were flying in a Ameritech private jet. They almost always did, as long as there was a flight available and space available on the flight. Ameritech now had a fleet of jets and helos, but Keegan remembered when there had only been one of each. The empire Jason has created was an amazing accomplishment. He started out merely as a martial arts consultant for some security companies, but his expertise under Grandmaster Keno's umbrella was quickly recognized. He moved up to consulting for the U.S. government, ended up training SEALs and FBI and others, and eventually putting together entire training programs. Then he started arranging security for large events across the country and eventually across the world. It was impressive. Ameritech now employed over 30,000 people and is still growing. And now, Keegan thought, kids like his Gabe could aspire to be an Ameritech agent as an alternative to the military or the FBI. Jason took a lot better care of his employees than the government did and was almost a no-brainer. Keegan looked down at his son, who was currently texting his girlfriend before they took off. He'd been through a lot the past few months, and he had some big decisions to make on top of that. And Keegan wouldn't push him. He needed to heal emotionally from the trauma now, or he'd be in trouble later. Gabe looked up at his father. "What's up, Dad?" "I'm just thinking about your future." "Well, it seems to be the topic of the week. We'll figure it out, and if you're not ready to make a decision, there's no hurry." Gabe nodded. "Thanks." "So is Taylor all excited?" Gabe smiled. "Yeah. She couldn't sleep knowing I was on my way. We're hoping we can find some alone time tonight to talk, you know." Keegan smiled. "Yeah, I know. So tell me, son, what are your plans for Taylor?" "My plans for her?" "Yeah, how does she fit into what you have planned for your life?" "I don't have a plan for my life yet, Dad, as you well know. But whatever it turns out to be, I'd like Taylor to be a part of it." "And what if she meets a new guy at school or you meet someone else?" Gabe sighed. "Well, in my head, I know that's possible. And if that's what happens, then I guess we weren't meant to be. But I swear I can't imagine myself with anyone else." Keegan nodded. It was the same thing his eldest daughter had just said to him before she went back to Tennessee. But she was 24, and Gabe was only 17. "You know, you're about to be 18 in a few weeks, and Taylor will still be a minor. You need to be careful with her." "Yes, sir, I know. I don't intend to do anything with her that I shouldn't." Keegan gave a short laugh. "Well, things don't always go as you intend. Just be smart and be responsible." "Yes, sir." "I was a Christian when I was your age. I mean, my parents raised me to be. Took me to church when I was young, but when I was your age, I didn't live my religion. Mostly because I wasn't sure God was even real. It was Ricky Keno bearing his testimony to me out of the blue that changed me. But before that, I went after everything I could get. if you know what I mean. I thought it was the manly thing to do, when it was really just the opposite. Taylor is young and in love with you. She is malleable. Get what I'm saying? I think so. You're saying she would do whatever I want her to do. Keegan nodded. Well, I want us to do things right, Dad. I'm a virgin. She is a virgin. We will remain so. Is that what you wanted to hear? Yep, that'll do it. Excuse me, one of the young men on the flight said. Keegan recognized him. He was one of 4 new recruits on the flight that Keegan had recently interviewed. But you're Gabe Tanner, right? Gabe smiled at him. Yes. I just wanted to shake your hand. He held his hand out, which Gabe shook. When you went through what you went through, and how strong and level-headed you were, you are what inspired me to go Ameritech. Oh, well, that's a nice compliment, Gabe said. Thanks. Who knows, I might be headed the same way. Cool. Well, my name is Brooks Booth, in case we cross paths again. It's nice to meet you, Brooks. Brooks held out his hand to Keegan. Agent Tanner, nice to see you again, sir. You too, Booth. Better buckle up, Keegan said. We're about to take off. Yes, sir. New scene. It's May 27th, Monday morning. Now we're at the Sawyer Ranch in Savannah, Tennessee. So what did you think about my big crazy family, Heather asked Nolan. She'd invited him over to breakfast at her little apartment. He smiled at her. There are a lot of them, and they are great. I couldn't stop laughing at all the antics, especially during the giant Nerf battle. Yeah, your laughing is what got the both of us killed. Sorry, hon, it was funny. Your whole family is hilarious. I can't tell you how many times I blew my drink out of my nose. The things your sisters say, oh, Lord, they are funny. And your brother may be young, but he is my new hero, I swear. Watching him fight those boys, he was truly remarkable. Thank goodness, Heather said softly. Thank goodness? Yeah, well, my family can be a little overwhelming, and I was worried that you might think we were just too much. Your family, Heather, is what made you who you are. I'm in love with you. How can I not love them too? Heather smiled. It still thrilled her when he said those words. What about my father? Well, he can be a little scary, but having to take care of and protect 6 women and 1 little girl, you have to be a little scary. And with all that, he was just as silly as everyone else during the Nerf battle. He's pretty cool. After everything I've read about him and after meeting him, I have a lot of respect for him. Even after he grilled you about what you do and what you've been doing and how many girls you've dated and why you aren't married yet and what are your intentions? Nolan chuckled. Even after all that, I would expect anything less from him. No, me neither. And it's not ego. He truly cares for you. I mean, he isn't even your biological father. He gives all credit to your real dad by wanting you to keep your father's name. Keegan Tanner is a remarkable man. He smiled. And your mom must be the sweetest lady I've ever met. She might even beat my 6th grade English teacher. Heather giggled. Tell me about this. Do I need to be jealous? Well, not if you consider she's about 40-something years old by now. But I was totally in love with her. She was sweet like your mom. She spoke in that same soft, lilting voice. She didn't win any Grammys, but when she read Shakespeare to us, I was in La La Land. Shakespeare, huh? I'll have to remember that, Heather said, as she rose to clear the dishes. He rose and grabbed her around the waist and pulled her close. You don't have to read to me Shakespeare. Heather, all you have to do is look in my direction and I melt, utterly and completely. It's been like that from the moment I set eyes on you. He raised her chin and kissed her thoroughly. It's still May 27th, Monday afternoon, Keno Estate, Crystal Cove, California. The Ameritech SUV slowed and came to a halt at the security gate, which woke Gabe up from a deep sleep. He sat up, scrubbed his hands over his eyes, and looked out the window at the familiar green lawn, the fountain surrounded by flowers, and the red front double doors with Chinese script on it in gold. Gabe had been told it said, "Every step makes a footprint." The car pulled up around the circle and came to a stop. Gabe and Keegan got out and stretched and went to the back where the driver was unloading their luggage. He offered to carry it in for them, but Gabe and Keegan both declined. Keegan handed him a large bill and thanked him. Eric came out the front door and waved at the driver as he left and came down and shook Keegan's hand. Good to see you, Keegan. You too, sir, Keegan replied. Eric turned toward Gabe, who bowed deeply to him. Eric returned the honor and then shook his hand. Gabe, so glad you came to see us. Me too, sir. Please come in. Keegan and Gabe grabbed their luggage, which included Gabe's guns, and headed up the steps. Gabe kept looking up, hoping to see Taylor come running, but she didn't show. She's not here yet, Eric said as they entered the house. Gabe smiled sheepishly. Shelley appeared at the top of the front stairway. Hey, guys, it's so good to see you. Come on and I'll show you your rooms. They came up and were hugged fiercely. They turned right at the top of the stairs. Shelley pointed down toward the opposite end of the hall. Jeffy and Cam are staying in Jeffy's old room, so I thought I'd give you guys some privacy down here at this end. She ushered them into Bree's old room and Ricky's old room. Each looked out toward the back of the house, toward the ocean, and each had their own balcony. Y'all get settled and come on down. I'm sure you'd like a little snack. Dinner won't be for a few hours. Oh, and I've invited the Davises to dinner. I thought you might like to see them. Keegan smiled. Always. And thank you for being so thoughtful, Shelley. She grinned. I'm not always, but I have my moments. See you downstairs. It didn't take long for Gabe to get downstairs. He went straight to the kitchen where Shelley had laid the snack out on the island. It looked more to Gabe like a full meal. There were sandwiches, fruits, cookies, pasta salad. Wow, Gabe said. Shelley laughed. Well, I wasn't sure what you'd like, so I put out a little of everything. Gabe started helping himself. He filled a plate, bowed his head, blessed his food, and dug in. Shelley sat with him. Taylor will be here soon. They've been stuck in traffic. Apparently there was some big accident on I-5. Sorry to hear that, Gabe said. So, congratulations on graduating summa cum laude. Very impressive. Having any idea what you want to do now? No, ma'am, that's why I'm here. I can't figure out what to do or when to do it. It's a hard decision. Are you leaning any particular way? I'm leaning toward Ameritech. Shelley nodded. It's a dangerous job. Gabe looked up into her eyes. Her youngest son, Joey, was the lead Ameritech agent just under Jason. His own father was just under Joey. Yes, ma'am, I know. She nodded. I guess you do. She reached out and touched his face. The black eye was finally starting to fade. When I saw the video of the guy punching you, it made me cry. If it did that to me, I wondered what it did to your mom. Gabe's brow furrowed. He had no idea if him being punched made his mother cry. He hadn't thought about that. He did know that he himself had smarted off and made her cry. He'd been in his own little world feeling mad. He needed to work on that, do better, serve others. But in order to do that, he needed to be strong. I'm not sure if she cried. I guess that makes me a bad son, he answered. No, honey, that makes you normal. Well, I don't want to be normal. Keegan said as he entered the kitchen. Just a few weeks ago, I remember you telling Joey that you just wanted to be normal. Funny how perspectives change. Gabe smiled and nodded. I did say that, didn't I? Keegan smiled several times. He proceeded to load a plate and sat down, bowed his head, and silently blessed his food. Gabe rose and refilled his plate, and he looked at Shelley. Is anyone else eating? She laughed. No. Feel free to have as much as you want. I remember having teenage boys. It's like you can't get enough. But let me just tell you, we're having lasagna tonight, and I know it's one of your favorites, so save some room. Keegan laughed. Don't worry, he'll have room. Eric came into the kitchen and smiled at his wife. Does it feel good to have a teen boy eating at your table? She dabbed at her eyes. They grow up so fast and move away. Even young Eric and Logan and JoJo hardly ever come by anymore. He put his arm around her. Well, if you're desperate to feed some boys, we can take in some foster kids or even adopt some kids. Ha ha, Shelley said. Don't tease me. Who says I'm teasing? Shelley looked up into her husband's eyes. Seriously? Eric shrugged. Why not? We have the resources. Gabe smiled. This was very cool. He looked at his dad, who was also smiling. Shelley clapped her hands together. Let me think about it and pray about it. Eric nodded. You do that. And we'll pray together, and we'll see what God would like our next move to be. Until then, we have this young man to work on. Yes, we do, Shelley said happily. Gabe smiled and rose to take his plate to the sink. Being in this house with these people was always the most inspiring, uplifting thing. He hadn't even been here 30 minutes, and he already felt like saving the world. He gazed out the kitchen window to the ocean, which was a bright blue today. Eric placed a hand on his shoulder. I want to speak with you in a little while, but I want to talk to your dad first. Why don't you go take a walk on the beach, and we'll send Taylor down when she gets here? Gabe nodded. Yes, sir, that sounds great. He turned and nodded at his father. Dad? Yes, go, son. Not too far, though. Thank you, Mrs. Keno, for the snack, he said, using air quotes. You're very welcome, Gabe. Keegan smiled as he sat in the chair in front of Eric's desk. You know, Gabe calls this the hot seat. Eric chuckled. Ricky used to call it that, too. He drew a deep breath. Keegan, we rarely get to talk one-on-one. Usually when you're around, so are 20 other people. So, while I had the chance, I wanted to speak with you privately. I hope that's okay. Of course, I'm honored that you would take time for me. Eric smiled. Actually, you just stole my first line. I'm honored that you would ask me to help you and Gabe sort things out. I've prayed on Gabe extensively. He is a remarkable young man, a special young man, and I know you know that. He's a reflection of you and Lizzie, which means that the two of you are also special. Well, Lizzie is for sure. Eric frowned. If you don't mind, I want to address what you just said before we end this meeting, but right now I'd like to go in a different direction. I was thinking, I know when we first met you weren't real into God and Jesus, but I sense now that you most definitely are. Is that correct? Pretty much. Thankfully, I came around before Gabriel was born. Before that, I was a hard man. I drank a lot. I cursed a lot. I had a lot of relationships. Typical ex-military, dealing with the atrocities of war the best I could. Eric nodded his head. I appreciate the candor. So you changed once Lizzie came into your life. Well, Lizzie and her girls and had something to do with it, but also that was the same time your son came into my life. What does Ricky have to do with it? He came to Savannah, him and Bree together. He came to see Jeff in the hospital, and we were introduced, and out of the blue, he said he felt moved to say some things to me. Everything he said to me answered every question I'd ever had about God. It was like he was reading my mind. Of course, he wasn't, but God knew my heart and proved it to me that day. It took me a while to get on board completely, to understand what it meant to be a Christian man, but I've never looked back, and that's thanks to Rick. I never knew this, Eric said softly, moisture gathering in his eyes. I'm glad to hear an example of my son listening to and acting on the Spirit. Keegan nodded. He's a reflection of you. Eric gave a soft laugh and sighed. So then, Keegan, what is it you want for your son? Well, the acceptable answer to that is the always dependable, I just want him to be happy, but actually there's more to it than that. Eric nodded. Go on. Gabe, like you said, is special. There's a reason he's here. He feels like he might have a ministry, but not your normal preacher-type ministry, one where he can use the talents God has given him. He's an unnaturally superb marksman. He's a gifted martial artist, and now that he doesn't have football practice and baseball practice to take up his time, he wants to rededicate himself to going much further with that. At least move up in his belt rankings and maybe even do some tournaments. He's smart. He graduated with the 4th highest GPA, and that was only because he didn't pay much attention to his grades, because he was focused on sports and shooting and girls. He knows, and I know, that he should have had the highest, especially in such a small graduating class. I'm not complaining. I'm only illustrating that he is extremely bright. He's compassionate, and he has a close relationship with the Lord. He feels the Holy Spirit often and allows it to permeate his soul, making him emotional. Gabe is all that you say and more, Eric agreed. Has he talked about going into the military? He considered it, but he's not sure he wants to go that route, which means I will discourage it. One has to be all in to make it in the military. And does that disappoint you? Oh, not at all. I'm not sure that I want my son to experience the atrocities of war. And as an Ameritech agent yourself, as an elite, you would want him to experience that? Yes, I think it would be good for him. He's actually leaning in that direction. He wants to serve in some way. He wants to achieve the strong, hardened, lethal status of his heroes. Who are his heroes? Jake and John Apple, and you and Ricky and Jeff. And you. Keegan sighed. Yes, of course. He told me not long ago that I was his hero. And that brings us around to what you said earlier. I said Gabe was a reflection of you and Lizzie, and you said Lizzie for sure. I'm actually surprised by you downgrading yourself. You have to have confidence and high self-esteem in your job. You command many men. My confidence is high enough. Eric shook his head. Why would you not want Gabe to be a reflection of you? Keegan blew out a breath. He was beginning to understand the hot seat thing. Well, there are some things about me that I hope he reflects. My work ethic, the protection I offer my family. And how about your strength or your calmness under pressure? How about your power of discernment or your humility? What about your love of God? Keegan's lips closed tightly. I'm not so calm under pressure. When Gabe was gone, taken, I thought I would lose my mind. Well, I believe that's understandable, and I don't think that's what you're ashamed of. Ashamed? In consideration of time, I'll cut to the chase. You have a certain stigma or reputation. You are dark, angry, stern, and a killer. Wow. You really did cut to the chase. Let me ask you, would you kill again? He shrugged. If I had to. Do you hope that time will come? No, of course not. Why have you had to kill in the past? Well, sometimes it was kill or be killed. And sometimes it was kill or the perp would kill someone else. Like those children you rescued. Yes, like them. Jeff recently took out a sniper who would have killed you or your son. Are you grateful to him? Yes, of course. Should he think less of himself because he killed that sniper? Keegan shook his head. People call you a killer because you've been put in the place where you've had to kill. Who do you think put you there, in that place? Keegan sighed. I'll answer for you, Eric said. God put you, one of his chosen warriors, in place to help fight his earthly battles, to save innocent lives, to dispel evil and darkness. Even before you truly believed in him and started living in righteous life, you were his, and you are still his, and I can feel him smiling upon you. He's proud of you. He's saying, well done. And he is also not finished with you. He's given into your care another one of his chosen warriors, Gabriel, aptly named after the archangel who was a messenger of God. God sent Gabe to you and Lizzie because he knew you would steward him well. You have done and are doing a great work. You have not abused or neglected your children, but instead have nurtured them and protected them and taught them values and shown them the difference between right and wrong and dark and light. Keegan, you are not a killer. You are a warrior. Yes, you have a lot of kills under your belt, but that's what comes when you are the leader, the strongest, the Samson of your time. So take heart. You are a light. Your family is a bright light. And I, too, Keegan, am proud of you. I'm proud to know you. You are strong enough to do the hard things, to do the things no one else wants to do. Eric stopped and smiled and grabbed a box of tissues off the desk and handed them to Keegan. And that is the end of chapter 25. That was a long chapter.